Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Today, we're going to do something a little different. Neil is here. We're going to talk about story, and I'm going to let Neil tell you a little bit more about him.
My goodness, I can say anything I want right now, can I? Okay, so my name is Neil. I am a Enneagram 3 Wing 2. How did we meet, Lyndsey?
How did we meet? On a Zoom room.
We did in an interview. So we hired you to our team. One of the best decisions we've made. And I told you this past week. You didn't know it, but I went through your resume, went through all of your references, noticed the podcast reference, went and found the podcast and listened to a bunch of them before actually getting on that
Okay,
first room.
you said an episode, and now it's a bunch of them?
It's a few. Like everybody can have an off episode, so I just listen. You got to
Oh
listen to a
gosh, which one
couple.
was the off one? Which one was the
None
off
of them
one?
were off. What you want to do is this: you don't judge someone based off of their best or their worst episodes.
That's
You got
fair.
to do it based off of the
The
overall body of
aggregate,
work.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was how we met.
It's so funny that your first impression of me was like the show. I think my goal for it is to help people think critically about stories and like learn. And I think stories build empathy. And I think if we're more empathetic, I think we're better people.
Yeah.
That's my like big goal. But it's
Okay.
also fun. And it's also like, I always name my episodes after like quotes more than like movie
Okay.
titles.
Okay.
And I feel like this one I want to call you keep using that word um
Okay.
because I feel like people like to say story, but I don't think they always know what they're saying. I don't think it means what they think it
Mhm.
means a lot of the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Um
I dig that
because
title.
yeah, I think it's appropriate because we're going to talk about what why story is really even in the zeitgeist, like, and why it's mattering so much that we're like, and yes, I said zeitgeist, but like, um, we're gonna get nerdy for a second, a little bit here. There's different layers and parts of your brain that function differently and that developed over time, and that some are more automatic and reactive than others. Those are closest to your physiology and your brainstem. So those deep parts of your brain that control memory and emotion and trauma are also the most important to our survival. And we have certain things in that have stayed with us as far as the way that we process and encode information. And one of those is story, because just over the course of we didn't always have ways to write things down or take them, or, if we etched it into a wall, we can't take the wall with us if we've got to move now. So,
Yeah.
like, we had to tell that story in a way that was a predictable pattern that we all knew so we could remember the pieces easier, so that we could transfer that important knowledge through the generations. And so that is a pathway in our deep part of our brain that we relate to. And like it has very specific pieces to it. So when people say story, I feel like people just think it means like making things personal or coloring in a lot of detail. But really, when we're doing it well, we're tapping into that like deep level. And that's why I'll let you tell the rest of this. But the parts of when movies feel too long, or they lose you, or they're like off the rails a little bit, it's probably because you don't know who's the hero, what do they
Hmm.
need, what's the problem. It
Right. Right.
becomes muddy, and your brain doesn't have that baked in scaffolding to kind of trust and just let you enjoy the
Yep.
story.
Yeah.
Um, so that's that's why story is matters to us. But we can talk about now like what we mean by story. But like, I wanted to get a little bit nerdy on the brain's responsiveness to what we mean when we say story versus just like people saying words about
Yeah.
themselves.
I think it's interesting though too when you go back to just the way we were wired even a really long time ago, not like last week, really long time. It's like all the way back. if you think about story, it wasn't written down on paper like we have now. It wasn't on a screen the way we see stories now, or images, or whatever. It was spoken. It was transferred just in conversation, because most people weren't rich enough to have leather, or to have parchment, or to have stones, or to transfer any of that. And the majority of people weren't educated enough, skilled enough to be able to write it, to be able to read it, to be able to transfer it. And so that was like the upper tier. If you could read it and write it and communicate it, you were elite level,
Yeah.
a human at that point. But all story was just communicated and told from one generation to the next to the next. And after a while, the stories that stick with you are the ones that they connect with you on a human level. Hero's Journey it's a model of storytelling that has been used for a very, very long time. And some of your favorite movies, some of your favorite stories, they follow the same arc, and you almost view it as a circle. So at the top of the circle, basically it starts off with, you have a character who is the hero. The main character has a problem. If you're listening right now, I want you to think of one of your favorite movies, or a movie that you really, really like. For some reason, you connect with it and it just stands out to you. That character has a problem in their world. They're up against something. There's a struggle. There's a problem. They have a fight up against them, or something like that, right? Like
Katniss Everdeen.
there's a bully. There's an epidemic. They're gonna foreclose on our house. There's one of my kids just went missing. There's aliens just came and they're attacking. Whatever that is, that main character, the hero of the story, has a problem, and that problem we connect with on a primitive level, kind of at the deepest need of, we have to empathize with whatever that problem is. We're like, oh my gosh, that is too much for them to handle by themselves. And most stories, they have the hero who has a problem. They meet a guide. Now, the word guide is really just an overarching term for someone who is going to help them on their journey. This person is usually ahead of them in life in one way or another. They have been where this hero has been. They've gone through something similar, but they've also taken other heroes through it. They have helped other people get through problems like this, and they've got experience on their side. This is the Gandalf of the story. This is the Yoda of the story. This is who did you say it was for Hunger Games?
I would say it's probably Haymitch most closely.
Probably Haymitch. Yeah,
if we're going
tracks.
proper. Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. So this guide is there to help this hero, and the guide doesn't do the work for them. This is the Mr. Miyagi, right? But they have a plan.
Right.
They have a way through this problem. But that hero is kind of leaving their world for a while, sometimes physically, sometimes metaphorically, but they're leaving their world and they are going somewhere else for a while to gain the skills, to gain the tools, to take the weapon, to take the knowledge, whatever it is they need with them. And the guide is there to help them learn this skill, or to gain this weapon, or to find this tool that can help them solve their problem. And that guide calls them to action. Like, listen, you can't just sit on this, right? This isn't just for you. Here is your call to action. Here are the things that you need to do in order to get through and attack that problem that you're up against. And they really clearly map out that this plan that they have for them is going to help them avoid failure. And you're going to see, typically in this part of the movie, there's going to be this back and forth where the hero wants to do it their own way and they kind of fail at it. And it comes back around. And the guide's like, I mean, you can keep trying to do that if you want, but if you're going to do it the right way, do it this way. And they learn whatever it is they need to learn so they can avoid failure. And they take that skill, that weapon, that knowledge, or whatever it is that they gained, right? It could be the Force. It could be, I learned how to do this differently. It's, I know Kung Fu. It's whatever that is. They take that back into their world and they fight the problem, right? And the whole story ends in success. That's really what the the guide is trying to do is say, listen, if you do this, you can avoid these failures, and this will help you end in success. Now, in all of that, one of the most important things to realize is that heroes are not looking for other heroes. Luke wasn't looking for and didn't connect with another hero. He connected with, on a deeper level, with the guide. He connected with Obi-Wan for a reason, because Obi-Wan's like, look, man, I've been there. I can help you do this. You just got to trust me. We're going to go somewhere. Now, Han Solo is still important in this story, and there is a friendship there. But at the end of the day,
But he
the
didn't
real
really like him.
no,
He was kind of in his way.
yeah,
when he's
because
getting started.
heroes do that sometimes, right?
Yeah.
They're the hero of their own story. And so heroes connect more with guides. Heroes are not looking for other heroes. They're looking for a guide. And if the story that you're thinking of, the movie that you're thinking of, like I think about Lord of the Rings, I mean, my gosh, you can't, that's why that story is timeless. That's why all of the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, all of those stories have that rooted in them. The hero needs something, but they more than often they need someone to help them get that thing that they're looking for. That hero's journey has been in storytelling for thousands of years. And it's what resonates with people, because what we do as humans is we put ourselves in the seat, in the place of that hero. We self-map, we connect with them, because as they're going through something, that might not be the thing that I'm going through, but you and I can identify because we went through similar things. And now my heart is in it. I'm connected to that character. That's why you get chills at that point in the story. And that is why, like you mentioned, even with movies, with stories, with, you know, a book you read or whatever, there is a pattern for successful storytelling. It actually almost sounds a little too cliche. The more you really spend time with it, you're like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Shouldn't this kind of be in everything? But you can add things to this. You can create mystery. You can,
There's a lot of anti-guides.
Yeah, absolutely. There should be things that kind of take you off. You know, we talk about red herrings, we talk about MacGuffins, we talk about all those sorts of things in storytelling. And after a while, some of that kind of can turn really cliche. I'm trying to think who it was. I think it's Tony Gilroy. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
Oh, Tony Gilroy is he is a screenwriter, screenplay. He's a writer, producer, I would say as well, for a lot of like Andor, Star Wars, season 1 and 2. And it's interesting, like, okay, his approach to that storytelling. So if you don't know what Andor is, it's on Disney Plus. They just had the season finale. It just came out yesterday. I haven't watched it, but season 1 and season 2 are kind of, they're leading up to the movie Rogue One. And you know where Rogue One goes, right? Because Rogue One leads directly into Star Wars episode. Is it 4? Episode 4, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that right?
1 through 3 was were the prequels when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
4, 5, and 6 were the original. So.
Yep. So it's leading up to 4, 5, and 6. And it's just this story of like, Rogue One is, how did they steal the plans for the Death Star and everything that went into that? Well, that was such an intriguing story because you kind of know the backstory, but you don't really know. And so Andor is 2 seasons, but it's probably spanning the course of about 12, 15 years. And they build this storytelling that you know where this ends. Like, you know what is going, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't fake that. Yeah. So you have to have a compelling enough story that comes down to like, why were they compelled to do this? What was really going on behind the scenes? And he was talking about this in a writer's room, and he said, you cannot write a story without knowing what that ending is. And a lot of problems that script writers, screenplay writers, all these writers right now get into is they have this general concept of whatever, but if they don't have an end to it.
Yeah, if they don't know the arc, like you should know your your goal, your arc, your like why, why
Yeah.
is the hero doing anything?
Right.
And I think that is really indicative too of like who bothers to develop the character as well.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever heard Dan Levy talk about working with his dad on the character development for Schitt's Creek, and he was like, "We can't get started. We don't have him yet. We don't have him yet." Like because he made him like know the life story of each of these people and why, because then whatever scene we are in, we know how that person would react, we know how that's going to interplay, and we know what stories we can tell.
Yeah.
And like I think also I think people think they need to have mystery, and I think they need to have like unexpected so much, and I think what actually is compelling is really vivid, really human detail told well. um because, and I think people think sometimes, I feel like this more so in songwriting sometimes too, where like I think people assume that specificity excludes.
Mm.
um but I think what it actually does well is make it more relatable, because you can smell it, you can taste it, you can hear it, you can feel it. Like I think that's what Taylor Swift does really well, is she'll color in all the details and all the feels, and you're like, yeah, that's not my exact story, but I get what she's saying
Yeah.
because
Yep.
she's painted this full picture for me of what was going on with her in
Yeah.
that scenario. And like you can extrapolate that so easily to so many other things, even if like, I mean, she does have a lot of breakup songs. I've dated and married one person my whole
Okay. Okay.
existence.
Okay.
Um, but
You know.
but like breakup songs can be about places and like
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
friends and
You feel
like,
connected to it
yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I think, to your point of like this longer form now in like these uh these like shows and things where we're telling
Yeah.
stories over the course of like hours and hours. And like I think what we're doing, what's making it more resonant, is we could tell the same story and it could have some level of meaning and impact in a movie if it has a clear arc still. But I think what we're getting is the experience along the course of the arc
Yeah.
of relating. Like it's just hitting us harder because we empathize with that person so much more because we've had so many more like
Yeah.
micro moments with
Yep.
them, and like we like know their world a little bit, we're attached to them more than
Yeah.
you can get in like an hour and a half. Another episode that explains me a little bit is the one I did um called A New Kind of Resolution, where I basically talked about when I learned to appreciate the place movies and art have in the world compared to like I didn't get it. And that episode, like I loved them and I like was in on it, but like I also didn't understand what I felt like as a kid was the self-importance of people giving Oscars speeches. Like I didn't understand it. Until I was in counseling grad school and was, so I'm an achiever and I probably never would have started down the road of like self exploration and like all that introspection stuff had it not been like kind of part of my school and job, and like I wanted to do well.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, if that's what it takes, they're like, you can't take a client deeper than you have gone yourself. I'm like, well,
Okay.
I guess I'm gonna have to figure that
Here
out
we
then.
go. Yep.
So that's what I did, and I think what, when you're sitting there and you're learning to empathize with someone's experience in a lot of ways, like, and you understand how heavy that is,
Mm-hmm.
um, like, and how hard that is, but like the effect that it has for them, like, and you think about actors who spend the energy and the time to like go to those places and portray those stories. You can't do that if you haven't, like,
Right.
writers and actors can't do these things well if they haven't gone to some dark hard places in themselves
Yeah.
to be able to navigate it. And otherwise you get writing that feels frantic and schizophrenic and like
Yeah.
immature and like just disconnective, which exists, but like
It does.
I think that's why like people who are in those professions, like the ones who have grounded themselves and done that work, I feel like tell the best stories because they can understand how to connect that like base layer in a way. And like, I think that's really important in like, especially you're talking about like long form story, like any kind of story, because there's all kinds of details you can throw in or take out, but like when you understand how to empathize with a character and with an arc that you're either creating or telling the story for, like you know what's important to them and you know what's important to the viewer, and that's what makes it resonate. Doing the work and knowing yourself and understanding how emotions and all those things work, because if you can define that like root feeling, because it's not about I lost this random spacey thing, blah, blah, blah. It's about the devastation, the disappointment. It's about the embarrassment. It's about those things being defined and shown well that make us resonate with them. I just had a very interesting thing I didn't really ever think of before, because you were talking about the hero wants to do it their way. And I think I'm also thinking a little bit meta here. I think it's interesting that our brain pattern thing that we used to relay information was a arc that was focused on people needing other people. That's how we chose to communicate important information that maybe wasn't even about that.
Yeah.
We focused on that, but also that the only way and when the hero starts to succeed is when they start to admit that they don't know everything and that they do need this other person. And when they're willing to, like, they keep losing until they give up on knowing everything and doing it their way. And then when they finally, literally the pivot point of this like biological imprinted pattern on our brains is like the ability to be humble and say I don't know everything, and to say I need other people and to be open to those people.
How
wild
I think
that's like crazy and weird and cool.
Isn't it frustrating though when you're watching a character not get it?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy for us as a spectator to be like, oh my gosh, if you would just do it, like he's trying to help you, would you just get it? Like, stop being so prideful. But when they're finally humble enough to admit it, we're like, oh, there it is. But when it's us, we don't see it the same way. We're like, no, I got to do this. I got to fight this. You're like, oh my gosh, what would somebody else say watching our story? They're like, you just need to do it, man. That's the
TikTok trend right now is like, if your life is a movie, what is the audience screaming at you right now that you're not seeing?
100%.
And it's like, oh, okay, that's a thing I didn't think about. But it's a hard thing to do. But I think the fact that it's like we're kind of saying when you do it, epic things happen. Like even on a small scale, I think that's true. Like the doors open up for what you're able to do and achieve when you're able to hold the tension of I don't know everything and I'm willing to try something new.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's so powerful because it's kind of like we get in patterns and we get in things. It's kind of like on Everything Everywhere All at Once when she puts her shoe on the other. Like, I love that. It's like you just have to do something you wouldn't normally do and then it like unlocks your brain.
Yep. Love it.
And like the whole world is suddenly full of ninja possibilities. Like, and so I just think that like, I think it's super easy to get stuck in our own tunnel vision, but like I think what this tells me is like, yes, the information, this is the mechanism we chose to relay information with, but also the mechanism was important for us to have too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I feel like that's of all the things that survived, like that's of all the things that we're willing to hold on to and make industries out of.
It's kind of wild. Like, I'll say this term because you and I both have very similar backgrounds. When people talk about how they're in a season right now, like I'm just in this season for this, or I'm in that season for that. That is one of the that is a it's a trigger word for me because I think what happens is when people talk about seasons, what they don't realize is they are in a loop until they learn the thing that they need to learn to get to the next season, the next phase. But people are like, I'm just in a season of this, or I'm in a season of that. And in those moments, I want to say, what is it? You need to learn something. There is something here that I've got friends who get really frustrated at a job, or maybe they're involved in a project or whatever. They get frustrated and they leave, they quit, and they go on to another place. And what you realize is over time, after years of doing this, I go, you didn't leave your problem behind. You took it
No.
with you, and
No,
you're
yeah.
going to do the same thing there until you learn this thing that you need to get through. Now, that's easy for me to say looking at it from this angle, but sometimes when you're in that moment, like, I guess I'm just stuck in a season of whatever, and I'm going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
What if the thing isn't really just like a set block of time that you just have to
Right.
outlast?
Yeah.
What is the thing you need to learn that you can take with you to the next phase? And you're not ready for that next phase until you
No.
actually learn that
Yeah.
now. And the longer you wait, you are just pushing that inevitability out
Hmm.
over and over again. Have some humility and realize, wait a minute, I don't have it all figured out.
What's
I need
the
to learn something. What do I need to learn right now?
Yeah, what's the common denominator in this me?
Yeah,
Like, you know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
yep,
I was laughing when you were saying that because, like, I had a pretty. It was not all bad because nothing is all bad, but like my first marketing job that I had for 5 years was pretty toxic by the end in a lot of ways. For me personally, I know it worked for some people. It did not work for me, and I was just taking on too much and like owning too many things, and like then I took a different job, and this job was better in some ways because it didn't have any religious things tangled around it that were saying every time I made a mistake it said meant something about me as a person. So that
yeah,
was better.
yeah. That's
But
helpful.
like the whole like workaholic kind of like over owning things that aren't mine, like not setting boundaries because I want to achieve and I want to be like productive and seen as the best, and like this was a place that there was enough work you could work for 24 hours and still be behind, and they would let you
Oh,
if you did.
100%.
And
100%.
so I had only been there a couple months, and I literally started looking because I realized that I like, my dad and some other people were like, well, you got to stick it, any job you have, you got to stick it out a year. I'm like, I
Ooh.
might not be here in a year.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like it was bad.
So it's a set amount of pain.
It
I
was
need
like
to
can't
endure
eat
this.
bad. Like anxiety that you can't stomach down food. Like
Oh,
lose 20 pounds bad.
yeah.
Like, and I was like, I'm just gonna like, so kind of rage applied to a place where I had some people that were working there at the time that I trusted their opinion of the situation. Because what I realized was, and then I also like, so this was like the end of the year, and I started that job in January of 23, and I also started therapy in January of 23 because I was like, I'm gonna be me wherever I go.
Yeah.
Like, she's
Yeah.
still there. She's
Yeah.
coming with me.
There's
We got to
Lyndsey.
figure out how to operate that system
Yeah.
in a more sustainable way, in a better way. And so that was like, it was, I mean, yeah, that job was maybe not the best job, but it wasn't as much that job's fault as the way I was operating within it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, yeah, like that common denominator of like, it's me, and I have to figure out that it's me and like kind of move on from that. And like, it's hard to do, but yeah, like, because I don't believe that like the universe gives us out, like, we've got so many of these situations we have to
Mm-mm.
deal with. I think you're right. It's like patterns we get stuck in
Yeah.
until someone or something kind of shows us or we snap out of it that we're,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of where like the guide comes into it. At some point, I think if I don't get some outside help, like getting that help is one thing, but being willing to listen and
Yeah.
really you're surrendering at some
Yeah.
point. You're like, okay, maybe I don't know everything, but I'll try it. So I do health and wellness coaching for people who live with type 1 diabetes. And I've got a client who has had type 1 for, I don't know, he's a senior in high school. He's just graduating now. He's going to go off to college, but he's had type 1 for maybe 10 years. And it just has really rough control. He's having a difficult time with it. It's not easy to manage, not easy to deal with. And I finally had a call with him and I said, listen, you've been doing it your way for how long? He's like, yeah, but that's, I said, how do you think that's going? He goes, it's not great. I said, okay, what if for 1 month you just do it my way? And if you hate it after the end of a month and it doesn't work, you can go back to doing it your way. And I had that conversation with just him. You're gonna laugh when I tell you where this story is going. You're gonna laugh. I had that conversation with just him, and he goes, "I'll do it. We'll lock in." Now he did a great job for about 2+ weeks of it. It was fantastic. Now a bunch of extenuating circumstances didn't work out well. So then we get on the next call with him and his parents, and they're amazing. And I said, "Okay, parents, just want you to know this is the conversation we had. And we talked about you've done it your way. Give me a month. Would you be willing to try it my way? And if you hate it, you don't have to do it ever again." And his mom goes, Days of Thunder. That's from Days of Thunder. Oh my gosh. It's like, I was like, wow, there it is. There's a bit of a movie reference there. There are some coaching tactics in there. There's a lot of diabetes, health, and wellness coaching information there. But yes, it all boiled down to a reference from Days of Thunder from, oh my gosh, who is Tom Cruise's coach in that? I can't even remember what his name is right now. Robert Duvall. I was like, yeah. And he eventually gets him to realize this is how I have to drive this car. I've been driving it my own way. I keep crashing and losing races. I need to try it this way. And it does come down to that. At some point, the guide is going to be there. But if the hero doesn't just say, I'm willing to do it, my way hasn't worked. That's those turning points you see in the movies. It's typically around like there's a bit of a training montage in there. It takes a chapter or two of whatever, but it's like they got to let go of some of that and say, all right, I'm willing to do this. And then you've got a better shot at whatever it is that you're, up against. What is that challenge? What is that villain that you're battling?
Yeah. I think it is interesting too to like, I don't know that a lot of people reflect on their own arcs or like holistically the arc, but also the mini arcs that we keep replaying. Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, we talked about this at our work wellness day, like they called them hero bars, where you kind of look back at like a thing that you've gone through and skills and situations that you use to like overcome it and like use that to kind of like say, I'm going to use that strategy, or at least the mindset that like, hey, I did a hard thing, I can do this hard thing. Like whether it's just the remembrance of that or you use some of the tactics and apply it to the situation. And like, I mean, it's so again, we talk about story, and like, I feel like this one's kind of like the meta story of culture in some ways. Survivor. Matt was having me, I'm not a Survivor person, but he's very much a Survivor person, and he wanted to rewatch an older but good season with me. And so we were watching David versus Goliath, and the David tribe loses 2 people 2 weeks in a row pretty immediately to like extenuating circumstances, like injury, health things, like, and it's like they're down, like, and it keeps happening to the David tribe. And that's kind of like their thing is like, these are the people that they get dealt rough hands and have to get back up, was kind of their conceptual of what defined David in this particular tribe. And like, I had never really heard that like defined that way, but I was like, oh, okay, so it does happen. So, okay, all right. So there are other people out there who also get the crap end of the stick often. Often too. And so, I mean, because like my first 5 years after college, like I jokingly but not jokingly call them the Job years because of my literal family, like between hospitalizations and like mental health crises and deaths and diseases and like you name it, it was happening to everyone but me. And I was trying to go through grad school halfway across the country and like figuring out how to be an adult. And so like there's that, and then like it felt like, okay, then I moved back and did that, and then it felt like we had like wave 2, and then we had wave 3.
Of course there
and
is,
it's like, all right, but I feel like gradually, like I do also think that that's why we weathered COVID better than a lot of people did, because we were like, okay, this is what it is. And like
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
we talk about things. We've weathered like awkward situations before, like, and like I feel like a lot of people my age that like were married during COVID, a lot of them are not married now. Um,
You are
and it's
correct.
seemingly triggered by things that happened or didn't happen during COVID. And so, like, I feel like knowing my story and like being able to, because that was part of coming out of COVID for me, was like, how did I handle it the first wave of garbage that
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
really not good. Like, I didn't have a lot of resources, but I also like went very like, well, the world sucks and everyone sucks, and I'm just gonna like crawl into my hole and
Yeah.
just save
Yeah.
all my energy, and that didn't help me. The second wave, I was like, I need people, and I needed people last time, and we're gonna at least try to bring some people in
Yeah.
on this
Yep.
situation and that kind of thing. And then third wave was like, all right, what did we learn from last time?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I feel like being able to know that arc of like, here's a thing that happened, here's how this normally kind of goes. It's gonna be down here for a little bit, but it's not gonna be down here forever.
Yep.
But we got to figure out how to like what worked last time, who was there, who wasn't there, like.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
feel like the people who take the time to know those things, I feel like don't get completely derailed every time something
Mm.
happens, or
Yep.
at least not for long. It's not
Yeah.
about,
Here we go again.
yeah, yeah, seriously, like a little bit, but, um, and I think there was also like this idea of, well, if you do all the right things, if you, do blah, 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 like you can avoid to some extent bad things happening, but like bad things happen to heroes too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And
Yeah.
it would be a pretty boring movie if they didn't.
They
But
have a
yeah,
problem. That's
yeah,
why we are so connected because we're like, oh, you got a problem? Guess what? I got a problem too. We
hmm,
both have problems. So yeah,
yeah,
it's easily like connected. I have it's kind of a life motto. I've been saying this for years, and like just what you're talking about with going through these difficult things, and all of a sudden you go through another difficult thing, and you're like another one. Nobody remembers easy.
yeah, that's true.
What we go through builds resilience in us, and those are the memorable things. But there's not a single person whose story you care about
Yeah.
who has had it easy their entire life, that has had
Hmm.
things handed to them. I've had to tell
Hmm.
my kids this all the time, like, Dad, this person has this and they got that and they got that. I go, that is going to matter zero in the long
Hmm.
run. You
Hmm.
have built resilience through this challenge and through this
Hmm.
thing and that thing. And at the very least, what you're doing is memorable.
Hmm.
That also plays back into what you said. We have to be willing to take a step back sometimes and remember, wait, I already went through this difficult thing.
Hmm.
I can handle this again. And what you said, like, how did I get through it? And maybe not do it exactly like that, but
Hmm.
what did I learn from it? Who are the
Hmm.
people I relied on? And what can I do to apply that to this? It's this building process.
Yeah.
But easy is not memorable at all.
No, it's not memorable, and it's not. I. It doesn't. It's not connective either. Like
Mm.
your easy doesn't really mean anything to my easy. Like
Yeah.
it's just they
Yeah.
just are. Um, versus like struggle. I feel like. Well, thanks for talking about story. I feel like it's important, and I feel like sometimes it's helpful to like talk about the big concepts behind some of these things because it helps them make a little more sense. So
Yeah.
I appreciate
Yep.
you taking the time and talking about story.
I'm here for it. This is fun. A lot of fun.